Freckles, continuing with chapter 3. Freckles fell into a rapid pace, for he had lost time that morning. When he rounded the last curve, he was almost running. There was a chance that the boss might be there for his weekly report. Then, wavering, flickering, darting here and there over the sweet marsh grass, came a large black shadow sweeping so closely before him that for the second time that morning Freckles dodged and sprang back. He had seen some owls and hawks of the swamp that he thought might be classed as large birds, but never anything like this. For 6 feet it spread its big shining wings. Its strong feet could be seen drawn among its feathers. The sun glinted on its sharp hooked beak. Its eyes glowed, caused the light, and seemed able to pierce the ground at his feet. It cared no more for Freckles than if it had not been there, for it perched on a low tree, while a second later it awkwardly hopped to the trunk of a lightning-riven elm, turned its back, and began searching the blue. Freckles looked just in time to see a second shadow sweep the grass, and another bird, a trifle smaller and not quite so brilliant in the light, slowing, sailed down to perch beside the first. Evidently they were mates, for with a queer rolling hop the first comer shivered his bronze wings, sidled to the new arrival, and gave her a silly little peck on her wing. Then he drew away and ogled her. He lifted his head, waddled from her a few steps, awkwardly ambled back, and gave her such a simple sort of kiss on her beak that Freckles burst into a laugh, but clapped his hand over his mouth to stifle the sound. The lover ducked and sidestepped a few feet. He spread his wings and slowly and softly waved them precisely as if he were fanning his charmer, which was indeed the result he accomplished. Then a wave of uncontrollable tenderness moved him, so he hobbled to his bombardment once more. He faced her squarely this time and turned his head from side to side with queer little jerks and indiscriminate peckings at her wings and head and smirkings that really should have been irresistible. She yawned and shuffled away indifferently. Freckles reached up, pulled the quill from his hat, and looking from it to the birds nodded in settled conviction. "So you're me black angels, you spalpins. No wonder you didn't get in, but I'll back you to come closer than any other birds ever did. You fly higher than I can see. Have you picked the Limberlost for a good thing and come to try it? Well, you can be me chickens if you want to, but I'm blessed if you ain't cool for new ones. Why don't you take this stick for a gun and go skinning a mile?" Freckles broke into an unrestrained laugh, for the bird lover was keen about his courting, while evidently his mate was diffident. When he approached too boisterously, she received him of a goodly tuft of feathers and sent him backward in a series of squirmy little jumps that gave the boy an idea of what had happened up sky to send the falling feather across his pathway. "Score one for the lady. I'll be umpiring this," volunteered Freckles. With a ravishing swagger, half-lifted wings, and deep guttural hissing, the lover approached again. He suddenly lifted his body, but she coolly rocked forward on the limb, glided gracefully beneath him, and slowly sailed into the Limberlost. He recovered himself and gazed after her in astonishment. Freckles hurried down the trail, shaking with laughter. When he neared the path of the clearing and saw the boss sitting motionlessly on the mare that was the pride of his heart, the boy broke into a run. "Oh, Mr. McLean," he cried, "I hope I haven't kept you waiting very long, and the sun is getting hot. I've been so slow this morning I could have gone faster, only there were that many things to keep me, and I didn't know you would be here. I'd hurry after this. I'd never had to be given excuses before. The line wasn't down and there wasn't a sign of trouble, but it was other things that were making me late." McLean, smiling on the boy, immediately noticed the difference in him. This flushed, painting, talkative lad was not the same creature who had sought him in despair and bitterness. He watched in wonder as Freckles mopped the perspiration from his forehead and began to laugh. Then, forgetting all of his customary reserve with the boss, the pent-up boyishness in the lad broke forth. With an eloquence of which he had never dreamed, he told his story. He talked with such enthusiasm that McLean never took his eyes from his face or shifted in the saddle until he described the strange bird lover. And then the boss suddenly bent over the pommel and laughed with the boy. Freckles decorated his story with keen appreciation and rare touches of Irish wit and drollery that made it most interesting as well as very funny. It was a first attempt at descriptive narration. With an inborn gift for striking the vital point, a naturalist's dawning enthusiasm for the wonders of the Limberlost and the welling joy of his newly found happiness, he made McLean see the struggles of the moth and its freshly painted wings, the dainty, brilliant bird mates of different colors, the feathers sliding through the clear air, the palpitant throat and darting eyes of the frog, while his version of the big bird's courtship won for the boss the best laugh he had enjoyed for years. "They're in the middle of the swamp now," said Freckles. "Do you suppose there is any chance of them staying with me chickens? If they do, they'll be about the queerest I've had, but I tell you, sir, I am finding some plumb good ones. There's a new kind over at the mouth of the creek that uses its wings like feet and walks on all fours. It travels like a thrashing machine. There's another tall as me waist with a bill a foot long, a neck near two, not the thickness of me wrists and the elegant color. He's some blue and gray, touched up with black, white, and brown. The voice of him is such that if he'd be going up and standing beside a tree and crying at it a few times, he could be sawing it square off. I don't know, but it would be a good idea to try him on the gang, sir." McLean laughed. "Those must be blue herons, Freckles," he said, "and it doesn't seem possible, but your description of the big black bird sounds like genuine black vultures. They're common enough in the South. I've seen them numerous around the lumber camps of Georgia, but I've never before heard of any this far north. They must be strays. You have described perfectly our nearest equivalent to a branch of these birds called, in Europe, Pharaoh's chickens. But if they're coming to the Limberlost, they will have to drop Pharaoh and become Freckles chickens, like the remainder of the birds, won't they? Or are they too odd and ugly to interest you?" "Oh, not at all, cried Freckles, bursting into pure brogue in his haste. "I don't know as I'd be calling them exactly pretty, as they do move like a rocking horse loping, but they are so big and fearless. They have a fine color for blackbirds, and their feet and beaks seem so strong. You never saw anything so keen as their eyes. And fly? Why, just think, sir, they must be flying miles straight up, for they were out of sight completely when the feather fell. I don't suppose I've a chicken in the swamp that can go as close heaven as those big black fellas, and then—" Freckles' voice dragged and he hesitated. "Then what?" interestedly urged McLean. "He was loving her so," answered Freckles in a hushed voice. "I know it looked awfully funny, and I laughed and told on him, but if I'd taken time to think, I don't believe I'd have done it. You see, I've such a little bit of loving in me life. You easily can be understanding that at the home it was every day the old story of neglect and desertion. Always people that didn't even care enough for their children to keep them. So you see, sir, I like to have him trying so hard to make her know how he loved her. Of course they're only birds, but if they're caring for each other like that, why, it's just the same as people, ain't it?" Freckles lifted his brave, steady eyes to the boss. "If anybody loved me like that, Mr. McLean, I wouldn't be spending any time on how they looked or moved. All I'd be thinking of would be how they felt toward me. If they'll stay, I'll be caring as much for them as any chickens I have. If I did laugh at him, I thought he was just fine. The face of McLean was a study, but the honest eyes of the boys were so compelling that he found himself answering. You're right, Freckles. He's a gentleman, isn't he? And the only real chicken you have. Of course he'll remain. The Limberlost will be paradise for his family. And now, Freckles, what has been the trouble all spring? You've done your work as faithfully as anyone could ask, but I can't help seeing there's something wrong. Are you tired of your job? I love it, answered Freckles. It will almost break me heart when the gang comes and begins tearing up the swamp and scaring away me chickens. Then what is the trouble? Insisted McLean. I think, sir, it's been books, answered Freckles. You see, I didn't realize it myself until the bullfrog told me this morning. I had never heard of a place like this. Anyway, I wasn't understanding how it would be if I had. Being among these beautiful things every day, I got so anxious, like to be knowing and naming them, that it got to eating into me and went and made me near sick, when I was as well as I could be. Of course, I learned to read, write, and figure some at school, but there was nothing there, or any of the city, that I ever got to see that would make a fella even be dreaming of such interesting things as there are here. I've seen the parks, but good Lord, they ain't even beginning to be it like the Timberlost. It's all new and strange to me. I don't know a thing about any of it. The bullfrog told me to find out, plain as day, and books are the only way, ain't they? Of course, said McLean, astonished at himself for his heartfelt relief. He had not guessed until that minute that it would have meant to him to have Freckles give up. You know enough to study out what you want yourself if you have the books, don't you? I'm pretty sure I do, said Freckles. I've learned I'd had the chance at the home, and me schooling was good as far as it went. Wouldn't let you go past 14, you know. I always did me sums perfect and loved me history books. I had them almost by heart. I never could get me grammar to suit them. They said it was just born in me to go wrong talking, and if it hadn't been, I suppose, I would have picked it up from the other children, but I'd the best voice of any of them in the home or at school. I could knock them all out singing. I was always leader in the home, and once one of the superintendents gave me car fare and let me go into the city and sing in a boys' choir. The master said I'd the sweetest voice of them all until it got rough like, and then he made me quit for a while. But he said it would be coming back by now, and I'm really thinking it is, sir, for I've tried on the line a bit late, and it seems to go smooth again and lots stronger. That and me chickens have been all the company I've been having, and it will be all I want if I can have some books and learn the real names of things, where they come from and why they do such interesting things. It's been fretting me more than I knew to be shut up here among all these wonders and not knowing a thing. I wanted to ask you what some books would cost me, and if you'd be having goodness to get me the right ones. I think I have enough money. Freckles offered his account book, and the boss studied it gravely. You needn't touch your account, Freckles, he said. $10 from this month's pay will provide you everything you need to start on. I'll write a friend in Grand Rapids today to select you the very best and send them at once. Freckles' eyes were shining. Never owned a book in me life, he said. Even me school books were never mine. Lord, how I used to wish I could have just one of them for me very own. Won't it be fun to see me Sawbird and me little yellow fella looking at me from the pages of a book, and their real names and all about them printed alongside? How long will it take, sir? 10 days should do it nicely, said McLean. Then, seeing Freckles' lengthening face, he added, I'll have Duncan bring you a 10-bushel store box the next time he goes to town. He can haul it to the west entrance and set it up wherever you want it. You can put it in your spare time, filling in with the specimens you find until the books come, and then you can study out what you have. I suspect you could collect specimens that I could send to naturalists in the city and sell for you. Things like that winged creature this morning. I don't know much in that line, but it must have been a moth, and it might have been rare. I've seen them by the thousand in museums and in all nature. I don't remember rarer coloring than their wings. I'll order you a butterfly net and box and show you how scientists pen specimens. Possibly you could make a collection of the swamp beauties. It will be all right for you to take a pair of different moths and butterflies, but I don't want to hear of your killing any birds. They're protected by heavy fines. McLean rode away, leaving Freckles staring aghast. Then he saw the point and smiled. Standing on the trail, he twirled the feather and thought over the morning. Well, if life ain't getting to be worth living, he said wonderingly. Biggest streak of luck I ever had. About time something was coming my way, but I wouldn't have ever thought anybody would strike such magnificent prospects through only a falling feather. Chapter 4, wherein Freckles faces trouble bravely and opens the way for new experiences. On Duncan's return from his next trip to town, there was a big store box loaded on the back of his wagon. He drove to the west entrance of the swamp, set the box on a stump that Freckles had selected in a beautiful sheltered place, and made it secure on its foundation with a tree at its back. It seems most a pity to nail into that tree, said Duncan. I haven't the time to examine into the grain of it, but it looks as if it might be a rare one. Anyhow, the nailing wouldn't hurt it deep, and having the case by it will make it safer if it is a good one. Isn't it a oak? Asked Freckles. Said Duncan. It looks like it might be one, and that fine grained white ones that make such grand furniture. When the body of the case was secure, Duncan made a door from the lid and fastened it with hinges. He drove a staple screwed on a latch and gave Freckles a small padlock so that he might fasten in his treasures safely. He made a shelf at the top of his books and last of all covered the case with oilcloth. It was the first time in Freckles' life that anyone ever had done that much for his pleasure, and it warmed his heart with pure joy. If the interior of the box already had been covered with the rarest treasures of the Limberlost, he could have been no happier. When the big teamster stood back to look at his work, he laughingly quoted, "Neat, but no gaudy, as McLean says. All we're needing now is a coat of paint to make a cupboard that would turn Sarah green with envy. You'll find that safe and dry, lad, and that's all that's needed." "Mr. Duncan," said Freckles, "I don't know why you're being so mighty good to me, but if you have any jobs at the cabin that I could do for you or Mrs. Duncan, airs off the line, it would make me mighty happy." Duncan laughed. "You needn't feel you're obligated to me, lad. You monna think I could take a half a day off in the best hauling season and go to town for boxes to rig up and spend of my little fixtures?" "I knew Mr. McLean sent you," said Freckles, his eyes wide and bright with happiness. "It's so good of him. How I wish I could do something that would please him as much." "Why, Freckles," said Duncan, as he knelt and began collecting his tools, "I cannot see that it will hurt you to be told that you're doing every day a thing that pleases the boss as much as anything you could do. We're being uncommon faithful, lad, and honest as old Father Time. McLean is trusting you as he would his own flesh and blood." "Oh, Duncan," cried the happy boy, "are you sure?" "Why, I know," answered Duncan. "I wouldn't have ventured to say so else. In those first days he cautioned me not to tell you, but now he wouldn't care. Freckles, that's some of the single trees your garden are worth $1,000. Freckles caught his breath and stood speechless. "You see," said Duncan, That's why they mean to be watched so closely. They take, say, for instance, a burrow maple, bird's eye, they call it in the factory because it's full of wee knots and twists that look like the eye of a bird. They saw it out in sheets to muckle, thicker than writing paper. Then they make up the furniture out of cheaper wood and cover it with the maple. Veneer, they call it. When it's all done and polished, you never saw anything grander. Gang into a retail shop the next time you're in town and see some. By sewing it thin that way, they get finished for thousands of dollars worth of furniture from a single tree. If you didn't watch Faithful and Blackjack gets out a few he has marked, it means the loss of more money than you ever dreamed of, lad. The other night, down at the camp, some son of Balaam was suggesting that you might be selling the boss out to Jack and letting him take the tree secretly, and nobody would ever ken till the gang gets here. A wave of scarlet flooded Freckles' face, and he blazed hotly at the insult. And the boss, continued Duncan, coolly ignoring Freckles' anger, he lay back just as cool as cucumbers and says, I'll give $1,000 to any man that will show me a fresh stump when we reach the Limberlost, says he. Some of the men just snapped him up that they had found some, so you see how the boss is trusting you, lad? I am gladder than I can ever express, said Freckles. And now will I be walking double time to keep some of them from cutting a tree to get all that money. Mither of Moses, howled Duncan, you can trust the Scotch to bungle things together. McLean was only meaning to show you all confidence and honor. He's gone and set a high price for some dirty whelp to ruin you. I was just trying to show you how he felt toward you, and I've gone and give you that worry to bear. They're so slow and dumb, those Scotch. Accepting present company, sweetly inquired Freckles. No, growled Duncan, heading the list. He has business to set a price on you, lad, for that's about the amount of it, and I'm not right to tell you. We're both done you ill and both meaning the very best. Just what I'm always saying to Sarah. I'm mighty proud of what you've been telling me, Duncan, said Freckles. I need the warning, sure, for with the books coming I might be tempted to neglect me work when double watching is needed. Thank you more than I can say for putting me on to it. When you've told me, maybe the saving of me, I won't stop for dinner now. I'll be getting along the east line. And when I come around about 3, maybe Mother Duncan will let me have a glass of milk and a bite of something. You see now, cried Duncan in disgust, you'll start on that 7-mile tramp with not a bite to stay in your stomach. What was it I told you? You told me that the Scotch had the hardest heads and the softest hearts of any people that's living, answered Freckles. Duncan grunted in gratified disapproval. Freckles picked up his club and started down the line, whistling cheerfully, for he had an unusually long repertoire upon which to draw. Duncan went straight to the lower camp and, calling McLean aside, repeated the conversation verbatim, ending, and nay better what happens now or ever. Didn't you dare let anything make you believe that Freckles hasn't guarded faithful as any man could? I don't think anything could shake my faith in the lad, answered McLean. Freckles was whistling merrily. He kept one eye religiously on the line. The other he divided between the path, his friends of the wire, and a search of the sky for his latest arrivals. Every day since their coming he had seen them either hanging as small black clouds above the swamp or bobbing over logs and trees with their queer tilting walk. Whenever he could spare time, he entered the swamp and tried to make friends with them, for they were the tamest of all his unnumbered subjects. They ducked, dodged, and ambled around him, over logs and bushes, and not even a near approach would drive them to flight. For 2 weeks he had found them circling over the Limberlost regularly, but one morning the female was missing and only the big black chicken hung sentinel above the swamp. His mate did not reappear in the following days, and Freckles became very anxious. He spoke of it to Mrs. Duncan, and she quieted his fears by raising a delightful hope in their stead. "Why, Freckles, if it's the hen birds you're missing, it's 10 to 1 she's safe," she said. "She's laid and is setting, you silly. Watch him and mark where he letches. Then follow and find the nest. Some Sabbath we'll all go to see it." Accepting this theory, Freckles began searching for the nest. Because these chickens were large as the hawks, he looked among the treetops until he almost sprained the back of his neck. He had half the crow and hawk nest in the swamp located. He searched for this nest instead of collecting subjects for his case. He found the pair the middle of one forenoon on the elm where he had watched their love-making. The big black chicken was feeding his mate, so it was proved that they were a pair. They were both alive, and undoubtedly she was brooding. After that, Freckles' nest hunting continued with renewed zeal. But as he had no idea where to look, and Duncan could offer no helpful suggestion, the nest was no nearer to be found. Coming from a long day on the trail, Freckles saw Duncan's children awaiting him much closer the swell than they usually ventured, and from their wild gestures, he knew that something had happened. He began to run, but the cry that reached him was, "The books have come!" How they hurried! Freckles lifted the youngest to his shoulder. The second took his club and dinner pail, and when they reached Mrs. Duncan, they found her at work on a big box. She had loosened the lid, and then she laughingly sat on it. "You cannot have a peep in here until you've washed and eaten supper," she said. "It's already on the table. And you begin on this, you'll no be willing to take your nose out till it's bedtime, and I will and get my work done the niche. We've eaten long ago." It was difficult work, but Freckles smiled bravely. He made himself neat, swallowed a few bites, then came so eagerly that Mrs. Duncan yielded, although she said she knew very well all the time that his supper would be spoiled. Lifting the lid, they removed the packing and found in that box books on trees, flowers, birds, moss, and butterflies. There was also one containing Freckles' bullfrog, true to life. Besides, these were a butterfly net, a naturalist tin specimen box, a box of cyanide, a box of cotton, a paper of long steel specimen pens, and a letter telling what all these things were and how to use them. At the discovery of each treasure, Freckles shouted, "Will you be looking at this now?" Mrs. Duncan cried, "Well, I'll be drawed on." The eldest boy turned a somersault for every extra, while the baby, trying to follow his example, bunched over in a sideways sprawl and cut his foot on the axe with which his mother had prized up the box lid. That sobered them. They carried the books indoors. Mrs. Duncan had a top shelf in her closet cleared for them, far above the reach of meddling little fingers. When Freckles started for the trail next morning, the shiny new specimen box flashed on his back. The black chicken, a mere speck in the blue, caught the gleam of it. The folded net hung beside the boy's hatchet, and the bird book was in the box. He walked the line and tested each section scrupulously, watching every foot of the trail, for he was determined not to slight his work. But if ever a boy made haste slowly in a hurry, it was Freckles that morning. When at last he reached the space he had cleared and planted around his case, his heart swelled with the pride of possessing even so much that he could call his own, while his quick eyes feasted on the beauty of it. He had made a large room with the door of the case set even with one side of it. On three sides, fine big bushes of wild rose climbed to the lower branches of the trees. Part of his walls were mallow, part alder, thorn, willow, and dogwood. Below, there's filled in a solid mass of pale pink sheep laurel and yellow St. John's wort, while the amber threads of the dodder interlaced everywhere. At one side, the swamp came close. Here, cattails grew in profusion. In front of them, he had planted a row of water hyacinthus without disturbing in the least the state of their azure bloom. And where the ground arose higher, for his floor, a row of foxfire that soon would be open. To the left, he had discovered a queer natural arrangement of the trees that grew to giant size and were set in a gradually narrowing space so that a long, open vista stretched away until lost in the dim recesses of the swamp. A little trimming of underbush, rolled of dead logs, leveling a floor, and the carpeting with moss made it easy to understand why Freckles had named this the cathedral. Yet he had never been taught that the groves were God's first temples. On either side of the trees that constituted the first arch of this dim vista of the swamp, he planted ferns that grew waist high thus early in the season, and so skillfully the work had been done that not a frond drooped because of the change. Opposite, he cleared a space and made a flower bed. He filled one end with every delicate, lacy vine and fern he could transplant successfully. And that is midway of chapter 4.